Welcome to WCAT. I'm Kiki Latimer, and I'm your host for the Catholic Bookworm, where we read to learn, but we share with love in order to understand and be transformed in our lives. I'm very happy to have with me today Leigh Snead. Welcome, Leigh.
Oh, thank you, Kiki, for having me. I've been looking forward to being on your podcast.
Thank you. Lee's written a wonderful book called Infertile but Fruitful, Finding Fulfillment When You Can't Conceive. And we're going to be discussing this book. Obviously, this is a painful topic for many people, just really a really hard issue. So I just want to mention that before we get started, just to acknowledge this is not usually a happy topic. Sometimes it can have a happy ending, but it can be a very difficult journey for many women and men as well. So, yeah, with that said, Lee, do you want to start us out with a prayer?
Sure, my own sort of podcast or radio ritual is to say a Hail Mary. So let's just do that. All right. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Mhm. Okay. That's a good way to start off.
Yeah.
Here we are. We're taping this in Holy Week, the beginning of Holy Week 2026. So appropriate time as well
Yeah.
for a journey, a passion journey.
hmm
Tell us a little bit about yourself for our listeners today who don't know you.
Sure. Leigh Snead. I am a fellow with the Catholic Association, which is an organization who tries to bring a faithful Catholic voice to the public square. So we try to, cheer on the bishops, try to support them, try to point out other great leaders who are doing things that are important to Catholic readers, Catholic lay people, especially, abortion laws in different states, children advocacy, sort of all those sort of mainstream news things, how they relate. We do it both ways. We bring Catholic concerns to mainstream publications, and then we take sort of mainstream news into Catholic audiences. So we write op-eds. We have a radio show called Conversations with Consequences on EWTN Radio. We just started a Substack. Seems like just start, but it maybe is more, getting close to a year now. It's called Catholic Conversations with TCA, and there we write shorter pieces or more in-depth pieces than are, than like just like the 750 words that you can get into another publication. And yeah, we just try to stay on top of things. And we're for women, which is oftentimes we do concentrate on things about motherhood, especially, and children, just because that's, I think, where our attention goes. And that's what we're interested in writing about. So I've been married for it's 2026 now, 28 years in the fall. And I have four children through adoption, four boys. And I live in Indiana. My husband's a professor at Notre Dame. And yeah, we've lived in Indiana for almost 21 years now.
I was wondering, do you know about the new journal that's coming out, The Better Part for
No,
women?
that does actually ring a bell.
Yeah, they're
Um,
about to come out with their first issue, so you might want to
yeah,
check that out.
yeah. Is that from the Institute for Church Life or something?
No, it is. I don't know who's putting it. I can't think of her name.
Okay, well, we'll both Google it later.
It's called The Better Part Journal, and
I
it's
better write
coming
that
out,
down.
I believe, twice a year. I interviewed her, and the name is escaping me at the moment. But I think it's going to be a wonderful journal for women.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So tell us how you wound up writing a book about infertility and adoption and
Yeah,
everything in
well,
between that gets tossed in
right.
between.
No, exactly. The I didn't really write too much about it. I mean, you just sort of are like, living your life and this is what we do. And I liked writing about other things. And um, I think at first I just wasn't that comfortable with writing the personal stuff. Which you've read my book, you've seen that I got real comfortable because it's really personal in the book. And I think that comes with age and experience and, understanding how other women or anybody really who's been like personal with me, like related something to their own personal experience in conversation with me, I really appreciated that. And so I started to see the value in that, to seeing like somebody who actually lived this. It's not a removed discussion of infertility. But anyway, how I got to write the book, I was writing short form pieces mostly. And then I was asked by the National Catholic Register to write a piece. I think I wrote one for Mother's Day and I think one for maybe National Infertility Week, Awareness Week. And it got a big response. Lots of DMs, lots of emails, a lot of sort of people saying like, "Oh, someone didn't know I knew you," and they said, "Wow, have you seen this essay on infertility?" Priests actually reached out to me and said, "This is so great. I can keep this in my file. Sometimes I don't know what to say. I don't know where to start when counseling a couple who's coming to me with this problem." And then I had a mentor who just, was like thinking about all these responses and just said, "Okay, I think, Leigh, this is your book." And I didn't even know I had a book, but but she was right. And so you put together a proposal, it starts to come together, and then I was very fortunate that Sophia wanted to shepherd me through and publish the book. And so here we are, yeah.
So you share your story of, basically spending the first 5 years of your marriage trying not to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Which is often very common nowadays. And
Yeah.
And then, sort of starting to worry when you decided to get pregnant when it wasn't happening right away.
Yeah. And it really should have,
Yeah.
probably should have worried us a little sooner because we were really half-heartedly avoiding pregnancy, which I suspect is probably pretty common with newlyweds. But I just felt like, it just was, I don't know. I think, when you live in a really secular society, we hadn't really found our sort of Catholic community yet. We moved a lot the first few years of our marriage, almost every year for the first 3. And we didn't really know, my husband was at like a DC law firm, big DC law firm. So there were a couple of people that shared our beliefs, but mostly it was, people who were living together, boyfriend, girlfriend, or just serial dating. And those were sort of the peers that we were around. And so it just wasn't, it just didn't, it just, we were victims of the secular culture,
Right.
and you think, I think before everything's hindsight, right? What you really think is a grave reason for avoiding pregnancy, like you realize later, you're like, oh, that was really shallow and not it, and just that was the devil whispering in our ears saying like, oh, you're too young to have a baby and things like that. But around that 4 or 5 year mark, we decided trying, and we knew it could take up to a year. My husband was actually working for the President's Council on Bioethics as a general counsel and drafting a government report called Reproduction and Responsibility, which during that first year of really with intention trying to get pregnant. And so basically he was learning every few weeks about something else that could be wrong. So, we're sort of speculating about that. We knew that at our young ages, we were going to have to see a doctor soon. But you just can't believe, you're thinking like, wow, whatever the rate is, like 90% of people get pregnant for having sex within the first year unprotected. And you just keep thinking, okay, well, it's been 8 months. It's got to be one of these next 4 months. You know what I mean? And you just start like those bargaining with yourself all the time.
Yeah.
And then we realized,
my husband and I, we weren't Catholic when we married.
Mm-hmm.
So we were contracepting for the first 7 years of our marriage. We were both in college, and because we got married very young, we were in college, so we were contracepting. And right around the time that we were starting to think about having a child, at a secular university in a philosophy class learned that, contraception was immoral. And that was like really eye-opening to me. It was a secular university. It was a secular argument. It did not bring up God. It was a purely philosophical reasoning,
wow.
which immediately made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we literally, once I shared that argument with my husband, we literally stopped contracepting the next day. That was it. But then it was like, well, are we going to learn NFP? So we learned NFP with the plans of using it to not get pregnant. But then we realized, well, we really didn't have any grave reasons at that point. It was time Because my parents were ready to kill me at that point. We'd been married
No,
6 years
right.
and no grandchildren.
I know.
So we started to use it to get pregnant.
Hmm.
And the first month when I did not get pregnant, 1 month, I remember going into absolute and utter terror because all
Yeah.
of a sudden I started to think, like, what if this whole 7 years I thought I was lucky.
Yeah.
I thought I was contracepting, and then I thought, well, what if I wasn't contracepting that whole time? What if there's something wrong? And I
Yeah.
just remember, just because I did get pregnant in the second month, but I remember that horrible fear that something was wrong with.
Yeah. And I think it's because, I mean, especially as, girls that grew up in the, 80s and early 90s and late 70s, that it really was drilled into us with, like after school specials and in the teen magazines. Like it was like impossible not to get pregnant.
Right.
So like you had to do everything you could to not get pregnant because
Not get
pregnancy
pregnant.
was out to get you and ruin your life. And so I
Right.
do think that it has the opposite effect of when you really would like to be pregnant, you're like,
Mm.
and it's not working.
I
You're
was
like, wait a
terrified
minute,
of
this is
getting
supposed to be
pregnant.
so hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
terrified of not getting pregnant, but it's interesting. I was also terrified of getting pregnant. Because
Yeah.
it had been sort of drilled into my head. This wasn't a natural state for
Right.
a woman to be in. This wasn't what my body had been designed to do. This was, like you're saying, it had been drilled into us in the 70s and 80s that you did
Hmm.
everything possible not to get pregnant.
Yeah. And
Mm.
I think, yeah, I had the same experience, even when I was like doing pretty much everything I could to get pregnant that first year. And I woke up one morning with, well, as I learned that PMS symptoms on paper look a lot like early pregnancy symptoms on paper. But I had new symptoms I'd never had before. So I just assumed, I was like, oh, this month it's working. It's working. This is it. And then I thought, oh, what have I done? And it was like crazy because my whole life was about getting pregnant, but I still had that
What have I done?
muscle memory of like, don't be pregnant. It's crazy what the culture has done in terms of like viewing what that means. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we went for a year and then we thought, okay, we have to do something, but we decided to take a vacation first just to sort of relax and have some good fun. And we had a great 2 week vacation. We came back. We decided we knew. I mean, this was in the old days before there was, restorative reproductive medicine doctor, pretty available for most people within a couple hours at least, or NAPRO doctors. And so we were going to try to go see Dr. Hilders in Nebraska at Creighton University, who is the Creighton model NAPRO, like patriarch. And we knew we had to learn because we just learned like the couple to couple NFP style. We had to learn Creighton model, and then it was a big thing. And so we just thought, you know what? I'm studying medical ethics in graduate school. My husband's on the President's Council for Bioethics. We know what the Catechism teaches on, artificial reproductive technologies and human sexuality. We can totally go to a mainstream doctor and we'll just bring our Catholic infertility playbook with us. Well, that seems easy, but these people, the big business of IVF is just insane. And the pressure, they don't really want to help you with anything else. They called it enrolling me. I was 27. They were dying to enroll me in their IVF program and even gave me like a money back guarantee. Like if you don't get pregnant, then you don't have to pay a thing. It wasn't money back. I guess it was no money. And every week we went in and we said, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. And they'd be like, okay, well, let's try this. Kind of just threw some stuff at me because up to that point, it's an unexplained infertility. But it was all just humoring me until I was broken down and desperate enough that I would say yes to IVF. And, we didn't. We knew what we were going to do. But definitely those ideas float through your head in those kind of desperate moments. You're feeling you're not getting good care from your doctor. The waiting room is like wallpapered, plastered with pictures of babies. And, you just think we could just do it once. We could just, implant one embryo. We wouldn't do selective reduction, like all these sort of bargaining things that we all do with ourselves with sin. But luckily, I mean, he did us a real favor on our last visit, he was so frustrated. This was maybe our 6 months in with him, that he started, he really like got angry and screamed at me, pointing back to his sort of lab, saying like, "I'm creating life back there, not destroying it." And we're just like, oh, this guy never even listened to us, from the beginning. And so we just walked out and we never went back. So that's a big part of it too, about my book anyway, that I really try to warn people from doing that, to thinking you're going to be in control, because you're already sad, you're already desperate, you're already stressed, you're all these things. You don't need to have a fight with your doctor every month. You need to find a doctor that you know, treats you like a whole person, like you are God's creation and you're worthy of dignity and respect, and treating you as a human being and not just a success rate. So that's something I really emphasize, because I could have really lived without that whole experience.
Mm.
And when we eventually did see Dr. Hilgers, it was just a world of difference. He treated us as a couple. I remember we both, they do a laparoscopy and then you both watch the movie of your insides. And we were both just like, yep, we made good decisions not to go into medicine. But it was just like this whole, just this cared for, loving, like, even though we never got pregnant, just seeing a doctor who cares for you like that is just a gift in itself. In fact, I'm 50 now, and I still see a NAPRO OBGYN, because I just like the care they give.
One of the things that you did not mention, I didn't read the very, very end of the book, but that I don't believe you mention in your book, is the differences that I've seen with couples that are infertile, whether the man is the one who's infertile or the woman is.
Mm-hmm.
And that there seems to be, it seems to be a much more painful situation when it's the man who's infertile, because there the woman is, having her cycle every month and she's healthy and everything's fine. But the infertility is, with the sperm, usually
Yeah.
the sperm count or the health of the sperm. As opposed to if the woman is infertile, then somehow she doesn't have that constant thing of like, I'm fine if I could just get rid of him.
Yeah. I think that
Does
goes
that come
both
out at
ways.
all?
Well, yeah, I think for everything we know, we think it was me, although we don't know what it was. You know what I mean? We never really got a diagnosis. There was some fine tuning of hormone levels. There was, but there wasn't any sort of like, wow, you're just like chock a block with, endometriosis. Nothing can get through there, or like you don't have a uterus or whatever. You know what I mean? There wasn't anything like screaming. I didn't have PCOS. Dr. Hildreth was actually very optimistic, giving us a 75% chance under his care. Somebody's got to be in that 25%, right? And that was us. I highlight three other women in the book, friends of mine, who also have suffered from infertility. And one of the stories is about male factor infertility. And I was really, really glad that she agreed to be included in my book, because I do think I feel like I talk a lot about how, just in general, you experience infertility in secrecy. It's obviously it's the most private part of your life, your love life, your married life. But also you feel embarrassed, you feel ashamed. And I think that, those just sort of cultural ties to virility and manliness and stuff, I think it could be even harder when it's the man, because I think it's just a different sort of dynamic within the marriage. Because certainly I felt all the time like my husband could have picked somebody else and he could just go out and get a new wife, and she'd get pregnant and we'd all be fine. And, here he is stuck with infertile old me. And, it's really easy to feel that way. And I think that, yeah, I think it's complicated no matter who the cause is. I think as Catholics, we really think of it as it doesn't really matter. It's the couple is infertile.
I had a dear friend many years ago, and she was very Catholic and very much traveling in rather conservative Catholic circles, where it was
Mm-hmm.
just expected that you would have a large family.
Mm-hmm.
And she had two children, and then there was no pregnancies for quite a number of years after that. And it was
Mm-hmm.
very interesting. She talked to me about the shame and that people were thinking she was contracepting, and she
Yep.
was mortified by the entire situation as a devout Catholic. And she was, thanks be to God, she was very grateful when another child came along. But she just wanted to have like wear a t-shirt that said, "I am not contracepting," every
Yes.
time she went to mass.
Oh, I know that that woman and I could share a lot, I think, in common over a glass of wine or coffee or something, because I felt the same way. Like, we're not contracepting because we had our first and only for he was the only child for 6 years. And I mean, he's adopted, but he resembles us. So I can imagine people not really knowing us, but seeing us at mass for 6 years. We've only got this one kid. Then our second adoption was twins. So I'm sure it was like, oh, they're contracepting. Oh, and now they've gone an IVF. I mean, and again, a lot of that's projection. You're crazy, and I mean, who knows? Probably chances are somebody maybe thought that. I don't know, but yeah, you think a lot about what other people are thinking of you, and I think people do say things too. Like I remember I was at a baby shower or like a baptism party or something, and it was with a lot of people who, again, very conservative, all had very large families, like at least 5 kids, and there were many more. And here I am with my one, and I was just, talking to another mom, just sort of trying to find common ground, like, oh, your kids are so great, I can't wait to have more. And she's like, well, you could just always adopt. And I was like, that's how I got this one. I mean, like, come on. You know what I mean? Like you're standing there with your 8 kids and you're gonna like put that on me. I'm like, yeah, okay. And again, that's one of those things where it's like what people often ask me, what are things you should or shouldn't say to someone, who you love, someone suffering from infertility. And it really is like with the adoption thing, suggesting adoption, like they know about adoption.
Right.
They know about all the tests. They know about this. They know about that. They have spent years on the internet of their lives trying to solve this problem. And so like sort of troubleshooting for them, unless they ask for that specifically, is like just,
Right.
they know. They know all about it.
It's interesting. My husband is an oceanographic research scientist,
Uh-huh.
and so he had the opposite. So he was, working in a very, liberal environment,
Hmm.
non-Catholic, environmentalist, that end of things.
Yeah, sure.
So when we had, our first child, well, that was okay, and then we had our second child, and that was okay. But when we had our third child,
Oh, you're burning down the environment and everything.
his boss actually said to him, "So just how many children do you want?" When he found out. It's like, wow. And Jim looked at him, because I was pregnant with our third, and he said, "Well, at least 3." And
That's
and
hilarious.
then we actually adopted our fourth child.
Oh,
And nobody could say anything about that.
no, right, right. You lose your
What
do-gooder bona fides if you question adoption, right? That's funny.
It was funny. I used to tell my 4 children, everyone knew from the beginning that Jamie was adopted.
Hmm.
But I would tell my children, I said, all of you were adopted. I said, because
Oh, yeah.
I said, all children are adopted because I didn't have to bring any of you home from the hospital. I said, I could have left you there and you would
Yeah.
have been adopted by someone else. I said, I chose to bring each one of you home. So I
Yeah.
said, in a sense, every child is adopted.
Yeah, that's really sweet. I never heard that one before. I like it though.
Yeah, so that's what I said. You were all adopted. I didn't have to bring you home. And then when they became teenagers, I would look at them saying, I don't know why I did bring you home.
I know some days, man.
I don't
I
know
know.
what I was thinking. You all
I
should have
know.
been left right where I found you.
I have a really close friend who also, we were going through infertility around the same time. She also, I think our surgeries with Dr. Hildress were like a couple months apart. And we both ended up with 4 adopted children. And we both have teenagers right now, as well as some younger ones. And we're both just like, do you remember how bad we wanted this? We wanted this so badly. They're gifts. They're gifts.
Oh man.
Oh man.
It was funny, when I wondered, I had a beautiful experience. So, you wonder, like, when you have children and you adopt one, will you bond in the same way or will you bond as strongly? And, all of that, those thoughts, but you do.
Yeah.
My daughter's wedding, her 2 brothers. So I had Katie, Jenny, Danny, and then we adopted Jamie. And
Hmm.
so Danny and Jamie, were both reading at the wedding. And I had this beautiful moment. So they were both about like maybe 17 and 19, and they got up
Hmm.
to read at the wedding. And I remember as they walked and sat down, I looked and I thought, it's so funny, I thought to myself, they don't even look like brothers.
I do that kind of stuff too.
And then I
It's so
just started
crazy.
laughing.
I know.
I'm sitting there at my daughter's wedding and I am laughing. I've got tears running down my face because I realized like it was that moment where and we've talked about it since where they come from doesn't matter at all.
No, not
One
a
came
bit.
out of my body and one got picked up in Providence and it didn't, and all these years later, there was no difference. It didn't matter at all. They were brothers and it just struck mom funny that they didn't look alike.
Yeah, that's funny. I have things like that too. Like, or I'll say things like, well, we don't have that. I don't think have any of that in our family. And then my kids will be like, Mom. I'm like, oh yeah. I don't just hand over the genetic heritage. Like, but I know we had the same worry because we adopted our first son and then, but I was still in my 20s. And so we still continued to try to get pregnant. And we actually worried we wouldn't love a biological child as much as our first child through adoption. I think it's just always a thing. But then you realize, like, it really, I believe too, it would, if we'd ever gotten pregnant, it would have been the same because your kids are just your kids.
It's a kid. It's
Yeah,
another kid. Yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
They really do grow in your heart.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
And of course, we all know that having a child doesn't necessarily mean that I mean, we know children are abused, that not every child is loved just because they're biological either,
No, sure thing,
that
for sure.
it's really about your heart being open to life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, so I go through. So we had those sort of two parts, like the before trying and then adopting. Our adoption went really quickly for our first, and then we tried again and we did the NAPRO stuff for a long time, and that didn't work either. A long time, 2 or 3 years, I think, but it feels like a long time when you've been at it for years and years. Eventually, then we decided to we took a break because my husband was teaching in the London program for a semester. And so my son and I and my husband were there for 6 months, and it was just so fun and great. And we took a break from the medicine because, it's needles and it's drugs and it's all this stuff. And it was already kind of weird being in Indiana with my doctor in Nebraska. I didn't want to put, like another whole ocean between us. I'm sure it would have been fine, but, I was just kind of goosey about it. And I think I was probably ready for a little bit of a break. The needles get to you. So we took a break, and at the end of it, we were getting ready to pack up and go home. And I said, "Oh, I should probably talk to Dr. Hilger's team and get back on the program." And my husband just said, "Why don't we just adopt again?" And I was like, "Yes, that's what I was willing." I couldn't say it to myself, but hearing him say it, it was like, "Yes." And we definitely kept trying up until, you know, forever, I guess. Doing things. I went through probably not under a doctor's care trying, but doing trying to remember to take like the healthy vitamins and the supplements that were supposed to work. And I mean, though of course you do get to a point where you're like, I don't know if this is really going to work, and I don't care anymore because I've got three screaming kids, and like it's I'm not always going to remember to take those vitamins, but still hoping. And definitely like during ovulation, sort of trying to make being together a priority. But it was always kind of a joke, sort of like, because we're going to get pregnant, and, but you still think, and, with my period to be late, I would still think, and, so it still kind of haunts you, even though even when I had three children, um, it's still, it's like, it just is a part of you. And it's so, I think it just, well, I mean, I think too, I think if you're a natural family planning or Creighton model or Billings or whatever kind of person, then you just know that your sort of fertility is always a little bit on your mind every day because you have to, do things every day as part of that. And so in the same way, your infertility is also sort of part of it. And, you're just reminded of little things. And, you experience like all of your friends, getting pregnant, and then, your younger friends getting pregnant and over the years. And now like your older friends are now having grandbabies, and sort of all these things that just are little reminders, like a little twist, even though, I mean, my story I feel like is joyful, it's happy. I try to be funny when I tell it because you gotta laugh sometimes. But I also try to be honest about how hard it is and that it never quite goes away. There's always still a little bit of a sting. For me, the trade off was I pursued adoption and got these four great kids. That I wouldn't have done that if I'd gotten pregnant easily, probably. Um, and
I
so,
want to talk more about, because I know at one point you say, infertility doesn't necessarily equal adoption. There
yeah,
are people that have chosen to stay childless, and to reach out in other ways. But I want to step back a little for the person who's listening to this, Catholic or otherwise, who's saying, what is wrong with IVF? Because I
yeah,
think a lot of people out there, Catholic, are doing IVF.
yep,
We have this huge number of now of frozen embryos, and
hmm
selection in utero,
yeah,
things like that. I think a lot of people just don't understand just how unethical, immoral IVF is. It's like, oh, you got a baby, this is a wonderful thing.
right.
What's,
Isn't that pro-life?
medicine? It's, what's the problem here?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, these are sort of the very basic things. So, well, and I think I'll talk about both sort of like the Catholic and the less Catholic reasons that it's not a good choice. As Catholics, we believe that the marital act, sex, is both procreative and unitive, and so using artificial reproductive technologies, especially IVF, you are intentionally separating the procreative and the unitive because you are, even if it's your own gametes, your sperm and egg, you're not having sex to create that life. And the life is being created outside of the woman's body. Um, so, and you're also, and this is sort of a more secular concern, this is Leon Cass actually pointed this out in his very, very good book called Toward a More Natural Science. He talks about inviting a third person, it's often more than a third, into the bedroom. I mean, it's not really the bedroom, but like when you invite like a doctor to sort of smash these gametes together, and deal with them, this is the most intimate act between, I mean, you're not really married until you have, consummated the marriage. And this most intimate act, this most precious thing in marriage, this gift that we've been given, is now being infiltrated by, scientists and doctors and techs and all kinds of things. So that's one thing that I think often that appeals to people's sense of aesthetics. Like they don't, when they think about it that way, they think, oh, where's the romance in that? Again, because again, you're just looking at the baby, you're looking at the end result. You're talking about what leads up to that. And I know I've heard people, like romantically, I mean, it's always a little TMI for me, but I know that people have certain attachments to like the date that they conceived their children and stuff, so I mean, think about it that way. Are you going to really like reminisce about the day your embryo was conceived in a lab? I don't know. I mean, maybe in this society it's becoming more normal anyway. So this is
We also have the problem that many times we're using, because there's a problem, we're using either donor sperm or donor egg.
yeah, so that's
So
like
yeah,
next level. You're already
yeah,
getting into
you're
that, which
already
is
in
a
another
big
mess.
mess. But even without that, so you're separating the procreative and the unitive, then you're also using pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, which is the screening of embryos. And that is, I think it could be, I mean, I think probably it started just to make sure that you had the embryos that were going to, thrive and grow, that were going to make it. And there were definitely biomarkers that could say that. But now, of course, they're screening for traits and potential disabilities and even sex and other things. I mean, there are these private companies. I think one's called Orchid, and they're actually marketing their services, their embryo genetic screening services, not even necessarily to infertile people. They're just for people who want like the perfect baby, and they market it as like, don't you want your baby to have every advantage? And I'm like, that's not the same. You're not helping your baby do this. You're just picking the one baby you think has the best chance of that. No one's talking about the discarded embryos, right? That didn't make the cut, whatever that cut is. And it's purely optional on your part because you're the paying customer. And her tagline is like, sex is for fun. IVF is for making babies. And it's like, what sci-fi weirdo world do we live in where that's the thing? And it's all, she's got like all this kind of trendy merchandise and like she's really glossy and pretty and very Instagrammy. And it's anyway, that's another part, the screening. Then
It
also,
really starts with the idea of a baby as a right, that you have a right to a
yes,
baby. You have a
yes.
right to a child
And the
as if
idea
it's a
that,
piece of property.
yeah, and I think the idea that there's no reason why we can't alleviate human suffering with scientific advancements and medical, technology. Like that's what it's there for. That people don't realize that suffering is just part and parcel of being a human being. I mean, as Christians, we technically know that, but I think even for us, it's hard because it feels bad, right? You don't want to suffer, and these people are saying like, "Oh, come here, I can make this better." I remember actually this line in I never read the book, but I saw the movie Cider House Rules,
Mm.
and I remember Kane, his name Kane, something Kane, Michael Kane, comes out of like the shed, and it's just like, I can help, and that's the same. It's the same promise that like Planned Parenthood, gives you, right? Like you have this terrible situation, we can fix it. Come here. We love you. Look at our hot pink banner. We're here to love you. We won't judge you. We can fix this problem. The same thing with the IVF. Big business. This costs a lot of money. And they're very deceptive with how they advertise the success rates. It's not great. It doesn't, and I think a lot of people think, oh, natural stuff like reproductive restorative medicine or NAPRO, that's really not going to get the job done. First of all, and the flip side of that is that it's not just about like saying the rosary in a lavender field and drinking green tea. I mean, like it's real medicine and real tests and real drugs and injections, and it's so it is real medicine, and it's also not a walk in the park. It's not sort of this gentle, thing. Even though it is holistic, it's still, but at the same time, I think people think, oh, these doctors are going to give me drugs to make more eggs. They're going to take the sperm from my husband. They're going to force them together. And then, so there will already be an embryo, and they're going to put it in me after they've pumped me up with all these hormones to make me hospitable. This has to work. There's no guesswork in this. This is like every step along the way is accounted for. And like I think you were sort of alluding to earlier, this circumvents everything. No one is getting cured of infertility. No one knows why they're infertile. I mean, they maybe have a hint or something, but that's not being treated. What's happening is basically they're becoming a, optimized incubator. I mean, for their own child. And they're still mother. And I think that's important for especially Catholics to say, we don't care how children were conceived. We love them. We love our brothers and sisters in Christ. But if we can help you, I mean, we want you to get to heaven, and so we're going to tell you the truth about this. But it's got to be done kindly. I think because again, it's impossible not to know somebody who has done it or their child has done it, and so their grandchildren have been born through IVF, and obviously those children are here, they're blessings. But knowing the truth about what that completely unregulated industry is doing to people, and also just our idea of the dignity of the tiniest, among us. I mean, they're being frozen indefinitely. I mean, what do you think is really going to happen? Like, are you really ever going to implant those embryos? No, that's why there's a million of them in cryo storage. I mean, it's really problematic. I wasn't very linear with that. I kind of, but there's lots of reasons why.
I mean, I know a couple, and they only had a few embryos done, and
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was three, with the plans to implant all three, but
Yep.
two got implanted, and then the third one is still, as far as I know, still frozen. Because at some point you're like, oh, life got in the way, and life got complicated, and so they don't get around to having that third one implanted.
Right. Or you hit a certain age and the doctor's like, I don't think you're going to be able to carry this baby. Maybe you could think about a surrogate. And then again, your whole more like big
Another
another
mess.
set of ethical, messes. It's just, I think it's just best to steer clear. And again, it's hard. And I try to like really acknowledge that because I think it's writing from my perspective. I have a good marriage. I do already have 4 children. I've gone through all of that, because adoption is not easy either. Infertility is not easy. And I hate to be like, but it's all great because look at me now. I really wanted to come meet people where they might be then. That's why, because I thought about a couple different formats, and that's why I decided to do like use my story as sort of like the template to intersperse other different lessons and stuff because infertility was different when I was in my 20s and then in my 30s and then even in my early 40s where I'm thinking like, am I going to be that story? Am I going to be in the Daily Mail about the woman who tried for 20 years to get pregnant and is now pregnant? You're not going to be that person. And actually, it was sort of those thoughts when I realized, okay, I am never going to be pregnant, and I can say that out loud. I'm not going to be like the crazy miracle story that mothers are telling other mothers for in like church circles and everything. Like, I'm not going to be that story. And that's when I was able to write my own story to be like, okay, I am on the other side of this now. Here's what I went through. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a painful thing not to be able to have a child when you want one. And,
Yeah.
like I said, I just got a glimpse of it in that 1 month, and that was enough. But when we went to adopt Jamie, it was very interesting. People were not necessarily on board with adoption always either. We
Yeah,
had one
because it's
family member who,
completely voluntary.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
interesting to me because one of the arguments we got was, well, you don't know what you're going to get.
Oh, yeah. Somebody
You
said
don't
that
know,
to me
maybe his
too.
father was, his great grandfather was a monster or something, and you're getting this. And I thought to myself, well, how much do I know about my own family lineage or Jim's? I said, I looked at this
Really?
person, I said, well, maybe my great great grandfather was a lunatic, or,
That stuff just makes me crazy. I mean, that,
we know so little. I said, beyond, our grandparents, I know nothing about my great grandparents.
yeah.
And most people don't.
And
And,
our genetic history doesn't determine who we are. I mean, I use
right,
this
right.
example in the book, like, everyone's doing 23andMe and stuff, and that can be interesting because we're all interested in like our stuff. But I mean, if you find out that you had this like really bad guy in your lineage, it doesn't all of a sudden you're like, oh, I guess I'm Hitler Jr. now.
That's it. It's all
Like, no, that's not it. It is not who you are. It's
right.
somebody who you genetically related to was.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought that up because that kind of stuff, we actually, I think, had maybe even 3 kids at this point, and our friend was experiencing secondary infertility, and they wanted to talk about adoption with us. And they we were, lived a couple houses down. We were good friends. They loved our kids. But they said to us, like, but aren't you worried about what you're going to get? And I'm like, a lot
Not
of,
until they become teenagers, right?
no, right. But everybody gets that. I mean, everybody turns into a teenager.
Everybody
So,
gets that,
yeah.
exactly.
But I'm just like, you see that these are my kids. This is what I got. Like, and I mean, honestly, like, you wouldn't say that to somebody like who had a biological child that was having like extreme mental health issues or whatever these things that people are worried about. Be like, are you
I used to laugh.
sorry you decided to have this baby? Are you sorry? Are you sorry you brought him home from the hospital and adopted your own baby? I just think people, yeah, that's the I think that sense of control and that loss of control when you're infertile, and then also when I think people can keep people from adopting because of that loss of control. There's just a lot of people involved, right, in the adoption triad, or even more than just 3. And so they like the idea that somehow they have control over their own genetics, and so they want to be pregnant. Or the second best would be IVF because they'd have some control, and it's all a myth, right? And I think that kind of thinking is what oftentimes will drive women to choose abortion for their child rather than adoption, because they think, I don't want this baby to be raised by genetic strangers. And so death is better. Or it drives people to the same, like, be like, I don't know what I'm going to get if I do adoption, so I'm just going to go ahead and do IVF. So I think those kind of kinship, biological important things, I mean, really, really sort of defeat our purpose. And it's too bad because a lot of people who I think we share a lot of beliefs with really think that the kinship and biological connection is a real solid argument against IVF and artificial reproductive technologies. But again, then the argument is often like, well, then you with a surrogate, you take the baby away from the mother, it's the only mother it's ever known. Well, okay, but then you're over here talking about how biological kinship is so important, and that baby that she just carried isn't biologically related to her. It's either related to the egg donor or it's related to the person. So what is it? Like, what thing? Like, they keep shifting angles to, argue certain points where I feel like there are so many other reasons to argue, that ARTs and IVF is not a good idea, that don't sort of throw families like ours under the bus, saying that, like, well, it's not as good, it's not the same, you won't feel the same, it's not the same, or, anyway, it's, I could really go off on that, but I do try not to talk too much about adoption, because what I know about adoption is just my own personal experience, with infertility, I feel like I've done more reading, I have more things to say, but again, I'm just a person who had infertility, I'm not a doctor or theologian or anything.
You talked about your friend Liz who adopted and then got pregnant.
Adopted twice even.
Which is very common also for that to happen. It's like, I think it just gets all those hormones going. But you mentioned that someone said to her, oh, how nice, now you can have one of your own.
Yeah.
And wow, that really, thinking about my son Jamie, that just gave me the creeps when I read that,
I know.
Like,
We often argue that our kids are, we don't have any biological children, but we argue that our kids, like, are more like Sneads than we are. Like, they have the essence of whatever it is makes our family there. They have it in spades. And also, like, I had someone say to me something like, "Oh, like, you deserve. I hope you do get pregnant. You deserve a miracle." And I'm like, I have these 3 beautiful children. Like, I've got my miracle. I'm good. But, like, people are coming from a good place. They want to say something positive, but it really does show this, like, little bit of soft stigma about adoption, about infertility even. I think people worry that it's kind of catching. And that's where you come with people who experience infertility, long for a child, grieve not being able to have a child, but are not called to adopt. And I think that that's something that's hard for a lot of people, because they're like, oh, you must have not really wanted kids. Or, like, what is your deal? Like, why can't you do this? And there's lots of reasons. Infertility is a medical diagnosis. Adoption, as you know, is a calling. And I think that we really can overlook those couples, especially in parishes when things are so geared towards families. And, if you have an older married couple, they don't have kids with them maybe, but they've had kids, or they have grandkids. And, a lot of the time, but, there are these couples who are doing this and they've chosen to be fruitful in other ways, or they've heard a call to fruitfulness. That means, I think we have to remember that there's more fruits than just babies. The babies are obviously fantastic, but, there's just so much, service, or, honestly, your prayer is so overlooked in terms of fruits. Like, being able to, how many days when your kids were little did you have time to remember all the people you said you'd pray for? Like, never. Thank goodness now we have iPhones, right? We can put a list in our phone. But, when you have sort of that mental space, you can do that. You can actually make good on those promises of prayer for people, and you don't have to start a soup kitchen. It doesn't have to be this big thing. There's just so many ways. We're all, every one of us, the unmarried, the married, the celibate, the religious, like, we're all called to be fruitful. And yeah, so you're not obliged to adopt just because of infertility, even though that it does kind of confuse people. But I think when you think about it as, like, infertility is more like disease, medical thing, and the other is adoption is a vocation. Yeah. So
when you first, think about women who are in the throes of infertility, they're young, they've expected to have a family, their parents are waiting for grandchildren.
Yeah.
What would be the first thing you would say to that woman who's listening to us? Like, where does she start with this pain?
Yeah. Well, I think I would say to her that it's everything she's feeling is normal. That it's okay to feel all these things. I think that we do need still to do, spiritual direction and, frequent confession are actually really important but it's hard because you kind of think, like, I'm the victim here. Like, I shouldn't have to do this extra work, but it's so easy to feel resentful or cheated or, angry, and mad at your spouse, mad at your friends who get pregnant, like all these terrible things. I mean, these terrible things that you feel anyway outside of infertility can really get like laser focused. And so I think I think getting your spiritual house in order is really good. I think making sure that you've got a great, set of communication skills between you and your spouse, because it's easy to self isolate even away from your spouse, even away from the most loving, giving spouse, because you just want to get through it and then get pregnant and never think about it again. I mean, that was really my feeling. It's like, just put your head down, keep moving, and then you won't think about this horrible time anymore. I think be realistic about, what your parents, if you're talking about like them expecting grandchildren, I think they do, but you're their baby. You are their baby, and they want what's best for you, and they want to care for you. And so don't underestimate their abilities to, comfort you and support you in this, because they, again, like even if someone hasn't experienced infertility, your mother especially will know how much she loves you and how she welcomed you and was so excited to have you. She can imagine what the negative of that slide is, and she's going to be able to do that. And I think I did a lot of that. I did a lot of underestimating of the people in my life, in terms of support, and I really weathered a lot of it alone. So I think that's probably where to start. But also, make sure I think there's so many. I was going to say jump right to make sure you have like a good doctor, but I think before then, figure out what kind of interventions are you going to be comfortable with, because even within like the morally illicit interventions that Catholics can do, there's a range. There's a range from like pretty intensive to not so much, or mindful management, or whatever they call watchful waiting, or so I think because some people just aren't up for the needles and the scheduling and the doctor visits, and it's maybe just too much. I think knowing what you're up, what you can handle is important too before you start seeking medical things, or even just like if you just discuss that from the outset with your doctor, if you're already seeing a doctor. I think it's important at a certain point to discuss whether or not you feel called to adopt, because I think this was good advice that people gave us, that even before we were ready, we should do all the paperwork and things, because it can take a long time. And when you feel like really ready, you want to be ready to go. We had no idea that we would get ready, and then even before our paperwork was done, we met with an agency, and then in 6 weeks we had our first son. That was really fast. But I think knowing where you stand on a lot of things, even though this is practical and not so much spiritual care, I think it's good to know, to have that sort of framework to operate within, because I think what you're feeling, because it's not working, your body has its own schedule with ovulation and menstruation and all these things, but it's not working, and having to wait another 28 days for the next chance is really torture. But so having a bigger framework of what, and then of what, what the practical things, the practical steps you're willing to do, the practical steps you don't want to do, what you are looking for that you can't find. And then also, I think it's important to, at a certain point, probably not early because you're already dealing with too much, but as you get into it, and maybe it's a year of unprotected, unplanned or whatever intercourse, and you're not pregnant, you might start to think about, what if there's never an answer? What if this doesn't get fixed? What if I never get pregnant? What's that going to be like for me? What's that life going to look like? And I think that can help, because it does feel like dying a little bit. I imagine I haven't been divorced, but I have experienced friends who have experienced that heartache, and I don't think it's maybe quite the same, but it's like something that's so terrible, infertility and divorce too, but nobody actually dies. And so it's actually, sometimes it's hard to grieve, because again, it's an ongoing thing. Like, it's always still happening. You're still divorced. You're still infertile. Yeah, this is a lot, because, really, when you've just like haven't gotten pregnant for a while, like, this is a big thing. Again, this is like what I'm bringing at, 50 years of age, after, 20 plus years of trying to get pregnant and failing. I don't know. I think maybe I just hand him my book and say, maybe stick to the first few chapters at first. Because, I think I wrote in the beginning of the book, and this is definitely how I thought of it when I started out writing it a couple years ago, that I was writing it for, like myself in my 20s. But I do think as I get on with it, I think maybe in the, like the big spill I just gave you, like, I don't know if I could have handled it in my 20s, when which was what your question was, someone who's just starting out. So yeah, I said a bunch of stuff, but that might be too much. But I do think it's good to think about, just to be realistic about it, and think about what your options are, because you certainly don't want to embark on a series of treatments that you hate, that are making you more miserable on top of everything else.
I had a friend many years ago who was struggling with infertility, and she eventually did have children. I don't really know how. But during the time of really struggling with infertility, she shared with me that she used her exact words, if I remember correctly, were sex has become empty.
Yeah, there's
And that
definitely a
it's
danger
because
there.
that has become this huge struggle in the marriage, because they both really wanted children, and it had become this mechanical thing that you do, only with the hopes of getting pregnant. Like the unitive aspect of it was dissolving,
Yeah,
because of this painful, shameful, miserable like situation. They were both Catholic.
yeah.
Um, that so I don't know, what would you maybe share a little something about that? I don't
I
know.
mean, that's definitely a real thing. And it gets, when you have to like arrange your schedules sometimes. I mean, there was a point when we were under the doctor's care, so there were definitely like prescribed days for marital intimacy. And we were lived in a 900 square foot condo in DC, and we were having our kitchen redone. And so there were like people in our, I mean, and it was again 900 square feet. So there were people in there. And I mean, it was just, but for us, I mean, we are real, like, we really like a joke, and we really appreciate the absurd. So that really helped us. I think if you can make it fun, I think too, I mean, sometimes I think we tried, there was like ridiculous advice on the internet about things, about like how often, when you should do it. And I think kind of, trying those with, a sense of humor that will still, you're still doing it. You're still in the game for making a baby, but, whether you do it every day for a month, or, like all these different things, or make sure you drink green
Remember
tea.
reading, because when I didn't get pregnant that first month,
Yeah.
I was in this panic. I remember one of the things was having to put your legs up on the wall
Yes.
so that
Yes.
the bottom
All
was
the crazy things, or like,
gravity.
yeah. I mean,
Oh yeah, and
it's
being
just,
just hysterics, like my husband just laughing. Like,
yeah.
any idea how ridiculous you look with your
I
bottom up on the
know.
wall and your legs?
Because then you realize like the
It worked.
crazy, dire, extreme situations in which people get pregnant and they didn't have to like put their legs up on a wall and drink green tea. I mean, it's just the whole thing is just absurd. And I think if you can kind of really lean into your marriage, I mean, that's the most really, I think that's what saves you. If you can really lean in, let it actually make your marriage better, really. I mean, some of that mystery is going away. If you're newlyweds, you've tried to hold on to things. Like a lot of that is about to leave the building, but you know what? That's okay, and that's part of being. I mean, because your husband is your family. I mean, this is what you are. And I actually, one of the things I used to do when I was feeling really really bad was I would, you know, offer up that suffering for women who were looking for a spouse and hadn't found him yet. And we're getting older and we're feeling sad about that, and that that made me feel like the suffering was for something, and it just made me reflect and appreciate my own marriage, and what wonderful providence it was that my husband and I ended up at the same place at the right time in our lives and met each other. And so I think you just got to lean hard into it. And again, like, I mean, I made jokes about things. I invented like this fictional character, Fertile Myrtle, who was this like supermodel. She was really devout and perfect and really fertile. And she was basically like lurking around every corner trying to steal my husband from me. But I mean, I think it was really just like, it was a joke with us, because I mean, I think we just couldn't. I mean, I don't know. I think also it depends on some of the people I really have a soft spot for are people who came from big families. And so their mom was obviously a success in the fertility game. And oftentimes I've seen this, they're the one kid who's having the troubles. And like all their sisters already have a bunch of kids. And they can't stop having kids for some whatever reason, and they're struggling just to get pregnant the one time. And again, I think you can't sell them short. They're not just other people with babies. They're your family, your sisters. I mean, I was an only child, and gosh, what I would give for a sister. So I think that it's easy to feel like the black sheep of the family when can't participate in it. And then, of course, if you have big families and a lovely big family culture, then you're going home at holidays and it's all centered around your nieces and nephews. And all you want to do is just be in that game too. And you're not, again and again and again. And I imagine it feels the same way for, someone who's having trouble finding a spouse. But that is something. And I think my husband and I, both our parents divorced when we were young. He has a younger sister, much younger sister. I am an only child. And I think for us, it was just more clear that, there's not like a straight line from A to B, that, life can be problematic. And we are just so happy to, in a lot of ways, hit the reset button in terms of family culture. We love being married. We're, observant Catholics, we're raising our kids in the church. And, I think everybody's too tired to get divorced. And, and other reasons, but it's just, we're sort of rewritten the script. And that also meant infertility, and I think that just, things not working out was somehow built into both of our like formative years. And so for us, maybe it was a little bit easier in some respects. Again, it's so hard to think about it retrospectively because I mean, living through those memories, writing the book, I was like, oh, this is really sad. I was really sad. But it is. And I think that's what people, I've gotten a couple personal messages that have been like, I felt this way too. I thought I was the only one. I thought I was, irredeemable with my evil and this. And I think just, it's basically like a friend between pages, that can be like, yeah, me too. Because it's hard to find somebody else who's experienced infertility. And you're lucky if you do, because those are going to be the people who can really support you. But again, when if you find yourself in your 20s, it's going to be harder to find those friends.
It's an amazing book, Infertile but Fruitful, Finding Fulfillment When You Can't Conceive. Do you have the book there in front of you? I don't have a copy. I've read the PDF.
We've got them all over the place.
Where can people get your book?
You can get it directly from Sophia Institute Press, but it's also available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, other Strand bookstore, any place you buy your books. It's also available as an audiobook and an ebook.
Awesome. There's so much in it, and it's not a long book. I just want to mention that. Sometimes people get worried.
No, it's an easy read.
Yeah, it's an easy read, very clear, and you really spelled out like the things that are, difficult and unethical with the IVF, which I really appreciated that they're there. Is there anything you'd want to mention that we didn't get to? We've kind of meandered around.
Yeah, no, I think that it's important to focus on, maybe not at the same time, like I said before, I think you need to focus on sort of the practical things, and that's, finding friendships, finding ways to deal with things, spiritual direction, psychological counseling, like don't just, if you need it, get it, because this, again, is really, really hard. And, if you need to take a break from treatments, if you're doing treatments, take a break. And I think also, though, it's really important to revisit your spiritual life, because the same way that sort of sex is going to cease to be unitive on some days, you're going to feel pretty flat in the spiritual department some days. And so it's important to sort of keep an eye on that, to not let it sort of drive you to actual despair.
Amen. Do you want to end us with a prayer?
Sure. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Sacred Heart of Jesus, make my heart like yours. Amen.
Amen. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kiki.
Really appreciate it. Do you have another book in the works, by the way?
I have those fantasies every once in a while, but as of right now, no. But I have I have a notebook full of ideas. So maybe one about like prayer companions for a season of infertility.
That might be beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been
Thank you.
delightful.